Good evening and welcome. I call to order this work session of the Morrisdale Town Council dated November 14th, 2024. We have 3 items on our agenda tonight. We have fund balance presentation, council calendar, and town council roundtable. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and recognize Byron Hayes, our budget director and interim finance director, to facilitate our first discussion.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Oh, I apologize. Just as a point of order, I want to mention that we have 3 council members who aren't here at this time. We expect them all to be appearing as we go, and I'll note their attendance as they arrive. We also have limited capability for cameras, so we have 1 camera that is live streaming this evening. All our audio is functional, and we will be treating this recording as we always do and putting it out to the public in a few days. Thank you very much for giving me that moment. I'm sorry that I cut you off.
No problem. Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is the fund balance update for the fiscal year ending 2024. Okay. All right, so tonight, first of all, just want to point out that you all have a copy of the fund balance analysis report that was prepped for the ending of fiscal year 2024. It's in front of you. It provides a little bit more detail from what it is that we're going to look at today, but I'll briefly go over everything. We're going to take a look at kind of 3 different areas. Number 1, looking at fund balance at the end of the fiscal year. Also kind of taking a look at just some brief policy factors that go into that fund balance, as well as looking at some future projects and other considerations that also play into that ending fund balance as well. So first place that I want to kind of start is taking a look at the general fund balance and the composition that it makes up. So the first place that we got to start is what makes up the general fund. So there are 2 different areas of the general fund that we present in our audited financial statements. There's the general fund itself, which is made up of the general fund as well as the OPEB fund and LEOSA fund, 2 kind of retiree health insurance as well as other compensation. In addition to that, we also have our sub-funds, which is our capital reserve funds, our debt service, our healthcare fund, and our municipal service district. In the past, our healthcare fund had been reported in conjunction with the rest of the general fund that you see on the left side, but now we actually break it out and it's considered a sub-fund in our financial statements. So to give you all just kind of a brief overview of the total fund balance at the end of the year, fund balance increased roughly $8 million from last fiscal year. It's up to about $46.5 million in total. The 2 biggest areas that makes up is our committed area, which is where our reserves are held, as well as our unassigned fund balance. Basically, just like it says, the unrestricted amount of ending cash that we have at the end.
I apologize to interrupt you. We're having technical difficulties. Just give me 1 second. They can't hear you on the streaming.
Okay. We're coming back into order right now. I'd like to recognize that Councilmember Rao has arrived. So right now we have Councilmember Rao, Councilmember Johnson, Mayor Cawley, Councilmember Rabadi, and Councilmember Scoggins Johnson, and I'm passing it back to Byron Hayes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, so to continue on, total fund balance increased about $8 million from fiscal year 2023. That $8 million is made up primarily of about $7 million increase in the committed fund balance section and another $1 million in the unassigned fund balance. Kind of breaking down how we come up with the fund balance calculation. The fund balance calculation is the unassigned fund balance divided by the total general fund expenditures for that particular fiscal year. So for fiscal year 2024, we had about $43.7 million in expenses and about $16.6 million in unassigned fund balance, making our policy percentage about a little bit under 38%, 37.94% of general fund expenditures. To give you some perspective in comparison to your policy, that's about $5.5 million over the policy baseline of 25%, about $3 million short of the policy max of 45%. So we're comfortably right in the middle there. To give you another sense of kind of the scope comparative to 2024, expenditures are up about almost 9%, which means that total fund balance policy percentage is also up pretty close to that 9% as well. So as those expenditures are going up, even though fund balance also increased, it did cause the fund balance percentage to go down slightly. But that's not a cause for concern. That just means that our expenditures had gone up, but fund balance unassigned did not go up quite the same way, and that's majority due to the fact that our committed number went so far. Taking a look at the policy, keep in mind that unassigned fund balance is really there for emergencies. It's meant to manage those short-term and long-term any sort of security that the town needs, as well as manage any sort of emergencies that might come up. As I stated a second ago, fund balance should not be less than 25%. If for some reason it is less than 25%, council needs to devise a plan in order to increase it back up so that we are in compliance. And at the end of the year, if that fund balance is in excess of 45%, that does mean that there is additional funding that would be available for one-time capital purchases, as well as to be able to increase any additional reserves that council, if it's the will of the council. So ultimately, why is fund balance important for the town of Morrisville? So the town of Morrisville is a community that has their largest revenue sources typically come in the middle of the year. So our fund balance does serve as a little bit of an operational cash flow for the town. Since the majority of our revenues come in later, it allows us to kind of get through first quarter and second quarter without any kind of major issues when it comes to cash flow. So look at it almost like a savings account, a little bit of a cash reserves that we can kind of fund the beginning of the year as our revenues come in later. Taking a look at where the policy is in relation to the LGC requirements, the LGC requires us to have 8% 8% fund balance. That's roughly about a month's worth of total budget for the year in reserves. That is the minimum requirement that's required by the LGC. We do keep a higher number than that. So our 25% mark is roughly about 3 months worth of cash flow for the fiscal year, and 45% is a little bit under about 6 months worth of cash flow. So to give you just a basic sense, it really is there for those short-term and long-term needs for a particular year, and to maintain any sort of unforeseen circumstances that might come up. Taking a look at other factors that play into that calculation, both from the expenditure side and the unassigned fund balance side. As you can see by this chart, fund balance is slightly increasing each year over year, from fiscal year 20 to 24. However, our expenses are also increasing during that time. So you do notice that part of the reason why that fund balance is not increasing quite at the same rate is because of the fact that council has focused so heavily on maintaining a very high commitment to reserves and maintaining that the ability to be nimble when it comes to future capital projects and future capital expenses that might come about just in the future, not just for this year, but future years as well. Additionally, our expenditures are growing at quite a large rate, and we will talk a little bit more about kind of where that breakdown comes in. But also I do want to point out that another factor in all of this is our PO carryovers, our rollovers from the end of one fiscal year to the beginning of another. Sorry about that. We'll pause for a second. Okay. Excuse me, sorry about that. So it does factor in purchase order rollovers, encumbrances at the end of the year that get carried over. And one thing I do also want to point out in this chart is that we have adjusted this chart to capture the fact that the MSD is reported in, or the fund balance for the municipal service district is reported as committed, not unassigned. As it has been in previous years, we wanted to make sure that everything was apples to apples so that you could really get a sense of the growth, not just of the fund balance, but also the expenditures in relation to it. So, in terms of the general fund performance for this previous fiscal year, we ended up with a budget utilization of about 91%. So what that means is that we spent roughly about 91% of the budget in the general fund. The other 9% is broken out in this particular pie graph, the largest of which is are those PO rollovers that I talked about. That makes up the largest percentage of the budget that was not spent in the previous fiscal year in the general fund. Just kind of giving you a look of where we have been in the past 4 years. Obviously, these first couple of years, there's a lot of effects of COVID during that, and that's why you see that utilization a little bit lower than kind of where it's been the past couple of years. But staff has really put a major focus on making sure that we utilize the budget that we've received in a fiscal year and spend that funding as directed by the council and other staff initiatives that come up. So the thing that ends up playing into that that budget to actual percentage, that utilization, really is vacancy rate, having some vacant positions, not filling those in that fiscal year, as well as other delays in projects. An example of that being the $250,000 that the council appropriated at the end of last fiscal year in order to be able to pay for additional vehicles as they came available for the town. And thank you to you all for being able to appropriate that fund balance so that we could get that project rolling. Additionally, in page 8 of the fund balance analysis report, there is additional detail related to our utilization. Feel free to kind of take a look at that so you can see exactly where those different categories that are noted in that pie graph on the right side and how that plays into that total utilization factor. Taking a look at the capital reserve funds a little bit closer, as you can see, at the end of fiscal year 24, we had roughly about $7.5 million in reserves in these 4 particular funds. So far, in 2025, we're up to about $8.5 million. So those 4 reserve funds have grown roughly $1 million. Now, obviously, you all put about $4 million in those funds, a little bit less than that, about 3.5. However, we did plan for one major purchase, which is a new fire truck, and that makes up roughly about almost 2.5 of the $3 million that was spent or transferred out of those reserve funds this fiscal year. So other restricted fund types that we have 2 payment in lieu funds, a streets payment in lieu and a parkland payment in lieu. There's roughly about $5.5 million in cash that's available in those particular funds. The finance department, as well as Jeannie and the budget department, are working with staff in order to allocate those funds to any sort of capital projects or any streets or intersection improvements that the town will look to do in the current fiscal year as well as future fiscal years. And this is just a way that instead of us using unassigned fund balance, we have these other funding sources that we can tap into in order to get some of these projects done. Additionally, we have about $2.25 million in reserves in our debt service fund. Keep in mind, council did authorize 3 cents in debt reserve capacity each fiscal year moving forward, and that is playing into that reserve increasing. It increased last year roughly about $1.5 million, and so we'll see that that trend continue in this current fiscal year. So looking ahead, obviously we do have about $16.5 million in unassigned fund balance. However, we do have additional projects that we need to consider in the future when looking at what it is that we can do, not just with current fund balance, but also those committed fund balance amounts that we have. So the first thing I want to point out is that we are planning for a new contract for solid waste, looking to get that renewed as it's currently out for bid, and we should get those bids back pretty soon. That obviously plays into the amount of revenue that we could potentially have, both in the general fund as well as in a solid waste fund if we ended up enacting a solid waste fee. Additionally, we do want to consider the fact that we want to stay nimble for these future projects that we know are on the horizon, considering Town Center, the Public Works facility, as well as the Fire Station 3 construction and any land acquisition that the council wants to do, not just for these particular projects, but for any other projects. We are considering that as part of the capital improvement plan, and these funds are available in order to be able to get those done. Also kind of looking at our debt ceiling and the horizon of kind of where we sit in terms of our debt service. In about 3 or 4 years, we will have some debt roll off, and then another 3 or 4 years after that, we'll have some additional debt roll off. So obviously we look to be able to reinvest that capacity back into other capital projects to be able to get those projects done. We also did receive a bond premium this year after the sale of the most recent bond issuance. That premium is roughly about $1.5 million after our issuance costs, so we will look to invest that into some future capital projects as well. Additionally, do want to point out that we do have our ARPA funding running out pretty soon. Most of that funding is encumbered. We will encumber that by the end of this fiscal year and expend that within the next couple of fiscal years as well. And then other grant funding that we have, both with our public safety departments as well as with Town Center. You all know about the earmark from the Deborah Ross office for the body-worn cameras in the future. We also are consistently looking at other grant opportunities in order to help offset the need to potentially use fund balance or any other revenue that we have that's not currently assigned to a particular project. And so with that, want to pause and give council the opportunity to ask any questions. And I do want to point out, it's not the end of the fiscal year, it's the end of the calendar year for the ARPA funding. So it should be expended or encumbered by the end of next month. Excuse me.
You can do it. It's your meeting.
Okay.
I mean, you're facilitating this discussion. That's great.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, if you all don't mind just, flipping over your placards for me so I can, make sure I call it. There it is. Councilmember Scroggins Johnson.
I don't want Bianca to be upset. Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. It seems like we're consistent with the utilization for the town's funds.
Yes.
Now, it goes without saying that we did have a bump in fiscal year 25 of a slight tax increase. Do you expect the utilization to continue the same way it has in 23 and 24? And because of that additional funding, what impact do you see?
So first, I will point out that I do anticipate continuing on that same trend and keeping a budget utilization of over 90%. That's something that's very important to all staff, all departments, and so we are going to continue to do that. In terms of what the impact will be with the current fiscal year budget and where we saw the tax revenue increase, I do anticipate that still to continue to be utilized. One of the main sources that utilization is impacting is our reserves. Our reserves are going to increase in this particular fiscal year compared to previous fiscal years, and that is because of the commitment that council made and the increase in those totals. Additionally, we do have other, major initiatives that staff is undergoing, and we will plan to be able to spend that. Staff is really, there's been an aggressive push on making sure that we hire for the vacant positions that are currently open. Our staff in budget and finance are really focusing on trying to get those POs not carried over at the end of the fiscal year, making sure that departments are moving forward with getting their projects done. Not encumbering money at the very, very end of the fiscal year that's just going to roll over, really focusing on, strategic purchasing at the beginning of the year so that we don't end up with a large budget at the end of the year that needs to be either encumbered or just spent, arbitrarily. So those are the areas that we really try and focus on, not just from budget and finance, but the organization as a whole in order to keep that utilization high.
That's really helpful because I think it's so important that we maximize the value and return as much of the investment to the public as we can. So thank you for that. The second question I have is about the MSD,
Okay.
Municipal Service District. I know that the last phase of it is rather large, and that's why we haven't kind of had annual projects for a while, because the cost to redo, I think, is it the Gables that is the last leg of that, is a large, complex, and significantly below the targeted standard that we need to have for a town road. When will that, be realized, or do we have any projections about the MSD? Because eventually it's got to be done, and then it comes off as a encumbered or, expense.
So in terms of projections, are you more referring to when will the project be done? Or
Yes.
just kind of how the cash flow is looking right
It doesn't seem like we can do the project this year, because we still are trying to gather money, if you will, because it is a large construction expense.
So, and I'll be sure to allow Brandon to speak.
So, thank you. So our intention is to discuss that further with you at the retreat as part of the topic. So we'll talk about that in this next session here. You are correct. We are at a point where the 10-cent tax is not realizing what we need in order to complete that project. We're about $1.5 million short in the fund currently, based on our most recent estimate for that project. So we'd like to have that conversation with you at the retreat as we talk about that and this bond premium and some other monies that to understand don't want to do that in a vacuum, because there's other pieces of that. So if you're comfortable with that, we'd like to do that at retreat with you and let you understand again where that is, how does that line up or compare with other projects we have, projects we anticipate, and how to prioritize that.
And that's helpful. I just wanted to acknowledge that we have this major expense coming up, although, it looks like we're in control and we're being consistent with our investment in the
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rao.
In terms of lap salaries, you probably reviewed it, but like, how do we look at what's in there, and is that just going to the general fund balance, or when we go into retreat, would we be able to access that as we look at different needs?
So to answer your question, first we have staff personnel costs in two major funds, the general fund and stormwater. Stormwater right now is pretty small. That's not really factoring into these lap salaries at all, because that's not part of the general fund. However, we do work on kind of projecting and evaluating where we are from a staffing perspective and a vacancy rate perspective periodically throughout the year. And so we work to kind of develop a sense of how much is remaining in lap salaries, not just looking at, where we sit, but also those future positions that might be filled in that current fiscal year, in order to get a sense of really where we're going to be at the end of the year. In terms of, the utilization of that lap salary funding, obviously it's the will of the council. However, we do kind of manage that and try and, take a look at where we sit with any other projects throughout the year. We don't typically, look to utilize that or even kind of report it out until, the end of the fiscal year, the end of the audit, so we can really get a sense of where we are. But that certainly plays into that unassigned fund balance number. So because of where we currently sit and the increase in that, even with the increase in the utilization, the increase in the expenses are causing our fund balance to kind of, or causing the percentage to really maintain that same level, that same standard. So it's not necessarily just leaving the door. We aren't just looking to spend that automatically. It plays into that total calculation.
Yeah, I think it's important for residents to understand that we've made the whole idea that we're building up these reserves.
Right.
Pennies that we allocated for the transportation. How much is in, I'll go back and read, but do we have any idea how much is in there right now?
In
Transportation reserve.
in the transportation reserve. So, right.
A separate fund. I mean,
So at the end of this past fiscal year, we had about $4.2 million. Right now, we've increased and added another $950,000 into that reserve. So right now, it sits at about $5 million.
Byron, if I may, I want to add some context to lapse salary and just sort of bring council full circle to what authority you've actually given the manager in your budget ordinance. So this has been a conversation we've had in years in the making. Is lapse salary allows the manager through the budget ordinance to have some flexibility to be able to mitigate unforeseen issues without coming back to you to ask or draw down on fund balance. So what Byron has indicated is we effectively work throughout the year to monitor and manage it by a quarterly basis. And we bring back to you at mid-year at your retreat, you'll get a mid-year report on budget. And we will report how it has been used or how we are projecting it potentially could be utilized to get that money and keep it in play. But that's an authority that you already have given your manager with the intent purposes of executing the budget that you gave him the authority to do, to work on.
And could I add one quick thing, or maybe two quick related things? One, I think, is that, we continue to become more efficient, i.e. tend to see less of the managed vacancy money as we have fewer vacancies. And so, we have done better with that over the last year or two to some extent. So we are being very intentional about not counting on managed vacancy money to fund anything particular during the year. We're using that more as a tool than a planned spend. And also, I think important to keep in mind that, we will never spend all of our money. We just won't. We'll never be 100% staffed for a year. It just will not happen. But the money that we don't spend is also a considerable amount or a measurable amount of why we're able to not actually spend the fund balance that we allocate each year. Keep in mind that we balance the budget typically with some use of fund balance budgeted, but we typically don't expend that money. And that is in part because of that lapse salary money.
Councilmember Johnson.
So I was going to ask you to put this slide up, so thank you, Byron. Oh, 12. Yep, stay on 12.
Right.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. So on the bottom, that that chart there indicates what we know we're going to spend in this fiscal year and what to date.
Correct.
Is that fair? Okay.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay.
Right. So this does not include any additional appropriations that council might end up making from this point forward for the end of the fiscal year. But this is where we sit right now with what we appropriated in the original budget, as well as other things that have been authorized by council.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you for that. And then you talked about how we have two opportunities or two times that are coming up in the next 8 years where debt's going to roll off. So you said, 3 to 4, and then another 6 to 8.
Yeah, give or take.
So remind me what kind of, and maybe this is not fair, but how much are we talking about? What is that debt roll off each time? Do you have any clue?
I can certainly bring that back to you.
Okay.
Off the top of my head, I'd hate to give you a number.
That's fine. That's fine. I guess because where I'm going is, what is that an opportunity then for future bond referendums? And I'm trying to figure out what that equates to.
So it is an opportunity.
Dollar-wise.
It is an opportunity for future bonds. One thing I will say is that previously we have brought to council presentations by the rating agencies that have kind of encapsulated the plan for a potential debt issuance for the public works facility that is already kind of captured in that. So yes, there is some debt that's rolling off. However, we've already kind of planned for that in order to kind of help smooth that out a little.
Okay.
In
That's
addition
fine.
to that, that later roll off, we will plan hopefully to have another GEO bond issuance at some point in the future that'll also kind of help smooth that as well.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Rabbani.
I'm looking at the actual budget report, and there's just one thing that I wanted to ask about. It seems like when we budgeted revenues. I know that we budget both revenues and expenditures conservatively, but I see that in the area of permits and fees, we budget as a revenue. We budgeted 1.92 million, and we realized about 1.4 million. And I was just wondering if you had any insight into what happened there. It looks like we were about. I'm sorry, I'm on page 8, the very top table. It looks like we were about $600,000 short of what we had expected to achieve in revenue from permits and fees. Do you know what happened there? That seems like a big number.
So I can certainly kind of take a look. I can certainly take a look and bring you back kind of a little bit more detail surrounding the different variances that are in there. Off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly what what made up that shortfall in that budget, but that's certainly something that we could bring back to council.
Can I just add a little bit of extra there? And this is something Byron and I are continuing to transfer knowledge and understanding. So we have a revenue manual, and in that manual we outline really strategies in which we project and forecast major revenues. And permits and fees obviously are one of those major groups. We typically try to have a very conservative approach and do what is called a 3-year rolling average, because that particular source is not one in which we go out and bring something to us. It is development community coming to us to do something. So what I call that is a more of a volatile revenue source. And it's based on in our projections of really knowing what projects might be in the pipeline. And the key word here is might be. So in this case, more than likely, when Byron looks at this, what you're going to see is maybe something in terms of receivables didn't quite hit because the developer's still working on a site submittal. So not all of that revenue that's generated through either permitting and or through site plan submittals has been processed through yet. And that's why we apply a 3-year rolling average in our projections for that particular major source. I hope that gives you a little context.
I appreciate that, Jeannie. Thank you. But what I'm seeing here is that that the target, we missed that 3-year rolling average. So you're saying that the 1.973 million is based on a 3-year rolling average. So I'm just saying that we missed the 3-year rolling average by almost 30%.
So it's in the
Yeah, I'm in
it's
the
in the analysis report. It's
page 8.
So one of the other possibilities, just kind of taking a look at both the permits and fees as well as the restricted intergovernmental revenue. I am, without too much conjecture, in some of those cases, when we're looking at development services fees, we're looking at planning fees. And one of the areas that planning does receive revenue is through Smart Shuttle. And so some of that grant funding that typically would be a part of those regular development fees might actually be categorized, depending on whether or not it's a grant, in that restricted intergovernmental revenue area. So it is possible that, when looking at those two, that it's just a matter of where it's classified. And so it was planned for in one budget area and ended up being realized in another.
Okay. All right. But you'll bring that back.
We will bring that back.
Super.
to you.
Thank you.
And it could be that, again, going back to the site plan submittals, it could be that it didn't occur in this particular fiscal year, but it's going to hit in fiscal year 25. So it balances out the scales is what I'm saying. And it's a matter of timing. Not everything fits perfectly in a fiscal year when it comes to developments and the revenues that are generated.
But we'll certainly bring you back an answer to let you know. Any other questions? Thank you. All right.
Thank you very much. Our next item is item 2B, council calendar for calendar year 2025. Brandon Zudimer, our town manager, will help us facilitate this discussion.
Schedule.
There we go.
Okay. Good evening, Council. Thank you for a few minutes. So we started this process sort of remotely by email to gather some feedback around calendar and more particularly retreat, but we'll start with the proposed calendar for next year. So this largely represents the calendar that we used this year, just adjustment of dates. I'll walk through just a few highlights with you. Again, January 23rd, which would be a Thursday, we're suggesting we again do what would technically be a work session with department heads, but it would be more of a social get to talk to department heads you don't always see and interaction and that sort of thing. And that would be the Thursday before we would head out for retreat. So there is consensus of 6 of 7 members to go out of town, and fortunately all 7 of you are available for this weekend, the 24th through the 26th, so thank you for that. And then we just need to determine a location for that. I'll circle back to that in the retreat conversation. Again, February would have a standing work session that would be the same week as the second meeting of the month. March, you would see the same, but it would be our first budget work session. In April, we would, as usual, schedule 2 budget work sessions. The second one could be budget if needed or could just be a standing work session. You recall last year we needed to move the second meeting because of City Vision. We do not need to do that this year because City Vision actually falls the week after in the longer month there. Or the way the days fall in the month, I should say. It's not really longer, it's still April. But City Vision does not impact that meeting. Then again, in May, we would schedule 2 work sessions. That first session or first meeting in May then would be the budget presentation as we have typically done. The second regular meeting could include would include normally the budget work session and the public hearing on that. And then again, 2 budget work sessions. You may not need both, but schedule those in advance. They're much easier to take off the calendar than they are to get on the calendar after. That would push us into June. Again, another optional budget work session. That would be at your discretion, obviously with some staff input as to see where we're at. June 10th would be anticipated budget adoption, and then the 24th, if for any reason the 10th did not get it done, we would have to adopt by June 24th. That would move us to July, again, taking a month off from work sessions. Then August, September, and October would all be standard months with your 2 regular meetings and a fourth Thursday work session. November, just 2 regular meetings. We did a work session this year. We're here tonight, but it also would have normally opposed PZB. So I'm going to suggest that we not schedule a work session in November next year. And then again, December would be the regular meeting, but that will be a swearing-in ceremony. So not a lot of work anticipated at that one either. That's primarily a ceremonial meeting every other year. That's the recommendation. I am certainly happy to take any questions, suggestions, or others. Councilmember Johnson.
So I just have a request. There are only 4 times a year that we get 3 weeks between council meetings. And one of the work sessions is the work session in September is scheduled during that time frame. And I honestly think those 3 weeks are really important, that we all take a break. And it gives opportunity for vacation. And so I would just ask that we not have a work session on the 25th. If we move it the week before or 2 weeks prior, I would say preserve that 3-week break. I don't know that I said that last year, but I've always said that in the past prior to that too. So, and I don't know if anybody can commit to that now, but
Yeah.
I think
Happy
it's
to.
important.
I'm sorry. Happy to cancel that one. We could consider.
move it, not cancel.
Yeah, it
but
could be a
move it.
September 11th, which.
Which is what we're doing right now.
Correct. And so again, that may conflict with PZB. Can somebody help me? That would be the second Thursday, correct? So I think that would conflict with PZB.
Maybe that's why you put it in that week.
You could certainly look at doing it the 18th. That would be an off week.
No, I won't commit to that. What about like the next night, like the 10th? We've done that before.
Wait, what's wrong with the
They're
11th?
checking on the 11th now.
The PZB.
I think the 11th is a PZB meeting, and they meet here, so it's just a location
Can they
conflict.
meet somewhere else? Or do they have to meet here? Is that a
They
rule?
meet here to have everything recorded.
September 11 is PCP.
So we could do September 10th. That would be a Wednesday night. That would be back-to-back nights.
Or we could do a Monday before the next meeting.
You could do September 24th, or excuse me, September 22nd.
Or even September 24th, yeah.
Yes, you could do that
Monday
Wednesday
before.
then. You could just move it one night.
Do the Monday before, yeah, that would still give us the runway.
I don't know. Well, I don't really care. I'd like to preserve that 3 weeks. And you've done it in every other instance on the calendar except April, which is out of your control, the league conference. So
Yeah.
that kind of,
So,
All right.
It is what it is.
it is what it is. Thank you.
so those 2 days out of the 21 make a difference. That's what you're saying.
I'm sorry, say again?
So we're here on the 23rd anyway. The 25th, 2 days later, makes a large
Yes.
difference. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
it does.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. We haven't talked about or done in a while taking the council meeting off-site. That could be something that we could do as well on the 11th, since planning and zoning is here. That might be an opportunity to be out in the community in a different place. I know that's a heavy lift for staff, so I'm not asking to commit, but if we don't decide for sure tonight to switch it to a different date, or maybe be flexible and see if that's a possibility, we could choose a date now, like the 24th, and then maybe look into making it the 11th and adjusting the calendar if we wish. We did it at the senior center once. We could do it somewhere else. Wake Tech, maybe. I don't know, where the people are, maybe, or just something. It's just a thought. Meeting location on September 11th.
I'm sorry, that Monday would be the 22nd. right?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I think I said something else before, but
I appreciate. I would tell you that staff's preference would be stay in the room.
I
I'm
understand.
Going
I get
elsewhere,
that.
but
Yep.
it becomes a lift in terms of technology and challenges that, we're really working to get the room working well. I think that would be challenging in terms of getting a live stream going and doing some of that. If you're open to that, we can certainly schedule Monday the 22nd in lieu of Thursday the 25th, and then still preserve that
I
meeting.
don't actually understand why we can't just do it. If we can't do it the 11th, why can't we just do it the 18th?
Because there's folks, I think, that sometimes aren't here in that week in between or travel for work.
you can dial in. We don't have you could be remote.
If that's what works for everybody.
We want to keep it on consistent on a Thursday. I don't know what.
I
if
don't
that
want to do
matters.
2 nights in a row. I don't. Honestly, one night in
I
a row is
agree.
already hard. I don't want to be here 2 nights in a row.
I don't even like doing 2 in a week, quite frankly. I
Same.
feel like I'm not prepared for work sessions when they come right after a
Yeah.
council meeting. I feel like I don't have the opportunity to be as prepared as I would like for meetings. I don't like them at all in the same week.
Are we coalescing around the 18th then, with the possibility of some members who might not be here
Right,
and call
I
in
can't
because it's a
commit.
work session?
I can't
Right,
commit to
understood.
it.
Okay.
Do we have,
Let's do the 18th. That'll let us give you something to adopt. And again, as it gets in that direction, it's your calendar. As long as we give notice to the community, we always have the opportunity to update it.
Having said that, what if we looked at April and moved that work session with general topics unless needed for budget to the 17th?
Staff is
to,
open.
to what purpose? Just to make it sooner, or?
No, because
Well,
every
I will-
once in a while I need a 3-week break.
Is that one of the other opportunities for that?
Yeah.
It is, but
City Vision's in the middle.
City Vision's in there, which kind of messes things up too.
City Vision is April 29th. That's after that. Oh, you're saying that there's not going to be a 3-week break?
It
Right.
falls in the middle of that 3-week break, so
Okay, all right.
that's
then
why I
never
didn't.
mind. Yeah, then never mind. That's fine.
It's going to be a mess
Whatever.
in April.
Okay. Any other thoughts? The change I have from what you see on the screen is shifting September 25th to September 18th to preserve the 3-week break, which staff also appreciates.
I figured as
the thought behind that. So, okay. Again, then that is what we will bring you back on consent for approval on the 26th, and that will let us get it posted with calendars that are going out and other things. Okay.
Can we just go back one more time to Ann's suggestion then for April? It doesn't matter to us as a council, that 3-week break, because if we're going to go to City Vision, we lose that 3-week break, but that doesn't mean staff doesn't have that. Yeah, but,
Most of your senior staff will go.
yeah, but not everybody on staff. Well, okay, I don't know, we can move on if we've settled that. Yeah, but like, we have staff here tonight, so that probably wouldn't go to City Vision.
I mean, a police officer would have the night off, the clerks probably would have, I mean, you know.
I think it's a little different for staff. They tend to, not necessarily other than perhaps us, look for those breaks.
Okay,
I think, to be honest, I think that
Okay.
most of our staff can take their vacation when they need to. I think it's mostly probably your senior leadership that's here every time.
Yep.
That
Feel
3
that.
week is beneficial. Same for the
Okay.
clerk's office. So
okay,
we okay there?
I'm okay if you're okay.
Yeah, we are. Okay, thank you for that. And then we will move to some retreat discussion. So again, we are set, locked in for the 24th through the 26th. So I got a variety of suggestions on where to go, everything from down towards Winston-Salem to head to the west to support something going on where they were impacted, to go to Wilmington. So quite honestly, there's not consensus there, which wasn't expected and is fine. Again, I think from our standpoint, it's just getting far enough away that we're away and we're all focused on being there and not, I have to run home, I have to take a meeting, I'll get there as quick as I can. I think we all collectively work much better when we're far enough away that we're away. So with that, if you have other suggestions, if you didn't have a suggestion when you responded, Councilmember Rabati?
Yeah, I didn't actually think about supporting some of the towns out west, but I do actually think that's a good idea. I don't know whose idea that was, but I do think that's a good idea. I mean, we don't have to go far out west, but like if I know there's a list of towns that still need tourism dollars and can handle them, and they're gonna lose a giant amount because people think they can't travel there. So if there was one of those towns that's safe to go to, but that needs the dollars. I mean, I know it's not $1 million, but
Okay.
I was a Winston-Salem person, but I like that idea too. I would agree with you. That's kind of nice to help.
All right, thank you. We'll look to see what we can do in the direction of Western North Carolina. That would be fantastic. Just don't send it to me on Instagram because that's not going to work. Okay. Thank you. So then with that, you have in front of you, or at least up on the screen, discussion topics. So some of these are coming from staff, and then some of these are coming from council members. So I tried to combine those. So on the front of the page, you will see what my recommendation is for you to consider. I'll come back to that. On the back of the page, if we can scroll to that, there were a couple of other additional topics that were submitted, both a communication strategic plan update and a sponsorship update. I'd like to suggest we do those in a work session outside of the retreat, if that's okay. I think for the communications plan update, I would like to have the department here, and rather than ask 4 members of the department to all go out of town with us, I think that would be beneficial when we do that. And I think there's other components of communications I'd like to talk to you about. So if we could do that with all of them, and I don't want to take all of them out of town, if we can help it. And then sponsorship, I think we may need a little more time than retreat before we have a meaningful update to share. We have the RFP out. We should be getting a consultant this month and then starting on that work. And if it's ready sooner, we might even come before retreat if it's ready. But if that's okay, I think we'll do that outside of a retreat. And then work towards focusing on more of what's on the front page. The other thing I would mention is that there has been some discussion individually and in a couple of small groups about a facilitated discussion about council communications and relationships and working with staff. So I'm not recommending that for the retreat, primarily because of the time it would take away, because that's not a 2-hour, we need a window of time. Most of the consultants that we would work with, I think, would want minimally 4 and perhaps like a 6-hour day to have some meaningful development of some tools and conversation. So I would like us to consider that perhaps in early 2025, calendar year 2025, and that would be something we could do here, potentially on a Saturday, in town with someone from outside the organization to come in and help us with that. If everyone's open to that, I will look towards when that might be convenient, and I'll catch up with some of you individually to see what times might work.
I like that.
Okay. So then back to the front page, sort of the meat of this. Obviously, it's going to be a budget conversation, so we anticipate talking with you about, revenues, where we are for FY 2025 versus how we budgeted, what little we may have at that point to share about FY 2026. Also want to talk through anticipated increases for FY 2026 to begin to share some of those bigger ticket items which we will be developing. Byron is in the process right now helping us set up budget meetings with our teams to get some initial feedback from them. We'll be doing that in early January, so we'll have that to share with you. And that will potentially include staffing needs, which is a lower bullet in that same section. Again, we want to come back to you with the bond premium. So we've got about $1.9 million from that that we can allocate. It's limited. It's limited to what the bonds authorize, so it's primarily parks and infrastructure. But we could spend it in one of 7 or 8 different ways. So we want to talk through that with you in the context of the bigger discussion of things like the MSD and the 2-year check-in on the CIP and some other things that influence that. We're also hoping that by retreat we would know the status based on the federal budget of whether we were awarded the $1 million for Town Center through Congresswoman Ross's office, because that would help answer a lot of questions of what we might do with that bond premium. So we're suggesting sort of all of that funding falling under budget along with your mid-year update just on beyond where we are with revenues and also just other concerns or questions. Again, I already mentioned the 2-year review for CIP. Economic development will be an agenda item for the retreat, and that will be some initial recommendation around what a strategic plan might look like, and then also Tiffany sharing sort of a year-end report for 2024. So some of the stuff that she wasn't necessarily involved in, but we were, and then what she's been involved with since she's gotten here. Really pleased to share you. She has hit the ground running. I don't ever see her in her office. She is out talking to people and touring with people and meeting with people. So I think that started out really well as well. Yeah, thank you. She's, again, that's a great person, a great knowledge set for us to have that we just didn't have previously. So I think she's going to be tremendous. And then we want to talk about future planning. There may be, I will be talking to the school government to see if there's someone of their staff that might come in and talk with us about potentially, growth and development, redevelopment, but also what's the future look like for municipal government, and how sustainable are we? We have changing, developing needs. I think we'll have a bit more of a picture by the time the retreat comes around of going back to what some of the questions were asked about, what did this, most recent budget and going over revenue neutral do for us? What does that look like, longer out in terms of how is that helping us as we look at that, in addition to normal revenue growth, natural revenue growth, and are we at that maybe 4.5% or 5%, or are we back at 3 or 3.5%? What's that look like? And then looking beyond just now, but looking at least 3 years out to, at what point do we need to start to think about, are we okay, or do we need to think about how we budget differently, how we compensate differently, those kind of things, to make sure that we're sustainable, and if we need to make changes, that we're making those ahead of the, oh my gosh, the sky is falling, we've got to do that right now. We don't want to put you or us in that position. So I think we will try to bring someone in and look at that. And then again, environmental sustainability has been requested by a council member to be discussed, so have that on there. And then future town center, both property acquisition and some discussion around what the next phase or phases of the town center might be. How does that look? How would that work? Is it another PPP? Is it not? Those sort of things. Councilmember Rabati?
So I'm not aware of sustainability because the third bullet future plan section that's going to include a potential presentation from an outside person on what we're going to. I feel like last time we really showed the sustainability section, and I would prefer to move that up to main head, and I would like to hear things like how much money we save for sustainability efforts, for example, responsible development communities, and the fact that we probably these projects, what is the future plan to operate on those sustainability efforts. I think there's plenty there to make that a main topic, and I would like to devote some time to it. Because last year I feel like it's like, oh yeah, we're doing very much sustainability, and we just never did really talk about it all down.
Okay. Happy to do that. Other reactions or other things that are not on here that you feel are missed? Councilmember Scroggins Johnson.
So I was looking at the calendar and I was looking at this list and I go, are we having a 5-day retreat? There's a lot here.
There is.
So the format that you're proposing is similar to last year, where we would have an evening work session with staff on the Thursday, and then on Friday we would go to somewhere long distance. What's the format of the retreat? Because I just want to make sure that we have enough time to cover this list of topics.
So I think we would take an approach similar to last year, in where we would try to get a session in on Friday, and probably not a bus session. I think we can do things on the bus, but we're not quite as effective in that environment, trying to actually have cover a topic, right?
Yeah.
But I would like to think that if we could get everyone, that we've given enough advance notice to have people, we normally leave 1 or 1:30-ish. If we're going to travel a little further to Western, maybe we're on the road by noon, so we can get there and get a session in before we would do a meal together. And then again, I think we would have all day Saturday, so we could have, as much as 3 or 3.5 hours in the morning. Same thing in the afternoon, maybe 4 hours in the afternoon, and then we could do Sunday morning, and again, probably would need to leave potentially a little bit earlier if we go further Sunday, but maybe could still get at least one session after lunch. I'm not suggesting that's going to be enough time for all of this. We may have to look at that and put it to paper, but wanted to get an affirmation of this is what you'd like to discuss, and then we may have to decide, do we pull one of these out to do in a work session separately, or we could cover a topic Thursday evening if that would be your preference, rather than a less or a more social item similar to what we did last year. We're happy to do that as well.
I think Thursday, if we could split it, having some social and maybe one topic would help give us a little more breathing room on this agenda, because it is quite ambitious. I do agree with Councilmember Robati that we need to prioritize sustainability as a top line, because we did a tick box exercise last time, and I think we should I know that Kimberly is really good about stats and progress and so forth, and I'd just love to hear more about how we've been improving the program over time, and how many pages we've saved. Just some great KPIs would be helpful.
And that might be a helpful That might be a good Thursday night
Yeah.
conversation, where she could be here. We don't have to take another staff. I mean, our staff is willing to go, but again,
Right, right.
fewer that we have to take on a weekend, I
But
think
I think,
everyone would
yeah.
quietly applaud. So,
As long as we can do have social power and talk about sustainability.
no. No, I think we could dedicate time if you all are willing to come a little bit earlier. You know, we could start at 5:30 perhaps, and we could do something till 6:30, and then you could have minimally 2 hours, 2.5 if you wanted it, and still. And I know it's the night before we leave. I get that, but yes, I think we could absolutely dedicate meaningful time to a discussion that night. Councilmember Brown.
I think the sustainability is an important topic. One thing that I do think, and maybe we don't have the time to do it at the retreat, but one topic that I think is really important for us to address is affordable housing, because, I mean, the housing crisis is really now one of the biggest crises we have in the country. And I feel like we just have to figure out as a town and a council, what is the realistic things we can do in the near term and long term to have more housing. It's very, like, I know that right now the biggest challenge for us to come together is we don't want to have affordable housing or workforce housing through multifamily, but I do think that partnering with developers is a great way to increase the stock of units in the standard that we negotiated in Casto, and it doesn't look like I understand the concerns of my colleagues, but if we're not going to do it that way, I think I really want to kind of learn from the staff and what are our options, because we've been talking about this now for well over 5 or 6 years, and I don't think we have anything to show for it of what we're doing in terms of having housing. And this is a complaint I'm starting to get more from people that I'm getting calls from that are leaving Morrisville that live in apartments because they can't afford to live here. And I think it's a real problem in Morrisville that needs to be addressed this year.
So I think it may help us, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think it may help us to bring you an update. I'll be honest, I don't know there is much of an update right now. We've been talking about rental assistance as sort of your most recent preferred approach. And we had, we're trying to find perhaps another partner to work with Habitat for the properties on Church Street. I don't know that we have any meaningful update there or have identified who a partner might be, but I'll get that confirmed for you in advance of retreat. And then if not at retreat, we can certainly have that conversation in a work session here to circle back on that if that's the will of council.
Well, and as an addition to that, are there other ways of having affordable housing through other things than multifamily? I mean, are there other options out there that we could do to move the needle and have more units, so we can say of the people the population of Morrisville that in the future housing development we're going to allocate more for lower costs, so that people, because I mean the costs are astronomical in terms of groceries and just goods. And with the Trump administration now wanting to increase tariffs by 20 and 60%, I think you're going to see even more cost in the economy. And so this is going to be, I just want to get that out there. I want to see us try to figure out how we can come together to address this problem. And if we can't, then do we just have to come to a point where we're like, this is it, and just what the market is? And we have it as a plan, but I don't see us executing to that plan.
So I think, there's been a couple challenges there. One is that we have brought a variety of options, and I think there has been interest in those options, but there's also been, I think, meaningful concern about the necessary investment by the town and the number of residents or others that would be impacted. We run into that, I would say, in several options that have existed in part of that conversation. And I understand that. That's just stating where we are. So I think we are at some point running short of what other options might be, but I think it might be good for us to give you an update or a refresher on here's what's been talked about, here's what was decided, why it wasn't pursued, And again, I think we probably owe you a confirmation that we don't think there's really a meaningful option with Habitat where there's another partner to kick in there. I know there's concerns on the part of council of not necessarily the fact that there's a land donation, but that there's a meaningful cost after the land donation to make that materialize. There was significant concern, rightly so, about that additional cost. And then, we do have the rental assistance option, which I don't think is what everybody thinks is the greatest answer, but may be the option we have. So let us work with Michelle and her team, and we will bring you back an update and share where we're at. And then I think we can revisit that. Is that fair? Okay. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
So, no,
I
that's
missed
okay.
it behind the water pitcher. Apologize.
Oh,
No, sorry. This big one. I can't.
Okay.
I missed it past
I
that.
can't do anything about that. So just to follow up on that, yeah, I think an update would be really helpful. I think the update needs to be the number of affordable housing units we have in town too. We talk about this, we have these affordable housing units in multifamily. How many are there? How's that going? Just whatever kind of update we can get on that and everything else you said. So just to kind of back that up, I think that's good. And then back to your conversation, Brandon, about all these topics, I think as you start fleshing them out and really seeing the time you need to devote to each one of these topics, I think to move them to a work session is fine. The first work session of the year will be the end of February, so I think I'd keep that in mind about, prioritizing what topics. And maybe, I don't know, you might disagree, but maybe the town center is one of those that is pushed to February. Are we moving along on that one okay? Does that have to be a part of the retreat?
I don't know that it has to be. I think there's a couple components there. So, and I apologize, it doesn't say it here. There's the current town center question that we'll want to do in this sort of slightly larger context of the bond premium, and particularly if we receive funding from Congresswoman Ross of, there's, we can talk about some additional contingency to make sure that we're safe. We can talk about potentially putting back some of the items that you came to consensus on, removing some of those amenities. We do want to make sure, we want to talk to you a little bit about branding, wayfinding, and a social district, because there will be some cost associated with that. And I think we've hinted to you this idea of a town center district that's bigger than the town center park. But I don't know if we've ever sat down and said, this is what we're thinking. Do you concur before we start doing, a branding and wayfinding plan that doesn't align with what you're interested in doing? So that certainly can push. That is not a priority.
Yeah, and you'll figure this out as you get further along in the next couple of weeks. But I think that's fine to push some things to a work session. That's all I just wanted to say.
Oh,
I'd
thank
like
you. And yes, I
that.
think there's a couple things here that would be okay if they weren't in that work session. So I think budget is clearly where we start. We need to address CIP. Economic development is relevant, but again, one of the things could be outside of that, but it would work well there. But yeah, we'll prioritize and start taking this, put some times around it, bring this back to you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
There.
So I appreciate Councilmember Rao bringing up affordable housing because that's one of the big concerns that we hear about. We also hear about transportation and mobility, and I don't really see that in here much except for the CIP. So I'm not sure if we want maybe an update beforehand about road projects, their current dates, things like that, whether or not there's anything we can do to accelerate anything. Intersection improvements, I think, are top of mind. So as long as that we're talking about that at the retreat or in the next few months after that, hopefully we can keep those moving forward would be my thing that I like to share.
Yeah, so I think, you are hearing some of that in your quarterly capital projects update, which we've had some discussion about. Maybe that will be a monthly capital projects update as well for you and for the public. And again, Jeannie and I have talked a little bit as we had this bond premium conversation. We sat down with some of our staff to, ask what is out there, where are we at, what's going on. And so one of the things that I think we can certainly share is, here's what we've got planned. Here's the money we've got set aside. is it enough money, because we're finding things tend to be more expensive, or we find pieces of the puzzle that weren't anticipated when it was started, and then you find there's more to it. We certainly run into, I think, more challenges recently than I anticipated in terms of like right-of-way access or easements that aren't have been a little more challenging lately than I think we're used to. So we can certainly touch on that. And again, if it's not at the retreat, it could certainly be in a work session as well. Councilmember Body.
Anything that you could show me a report or send me an email, send it to me a couple days before, and I will get it on. But, like, so for example, like, you said budget and finance is the first one to start, right? When I look at that list and I see estimated revenues for 25, 26, anticipated increases in expenses, and bond premiums, and revenue allocation, to me, those aren't discussion topics. I don't think people list things about our estimated revenues for 25 and 26 because that's a transfer of information that we use. I would rather avoid topics like that and spend more time digging in with the economic development person who we never really had a chance to talk to, and goals for the next phase of town center. And to me, we can talk about property acquisition anytime, but goals for the next phase of the town center, that's something I'd like to talk about at the retreat.
Sorry, is your mic on?
Oh, God, do I need to repeat all that? I'm sorry. Okay, the Cliff Notes version is, I said that I think that it would be better if the retreat agenda included discussion topics, that where we need to hear each other's views, where we need to come to consensus, because, anything that's just a staff transfer of information, we could do that at any point. We could do that during a meeting before retreat. So, if we had like a retreat prep session, I don't know, but, or maybe that's the Thursday night session. But, things that we have to talk about, discussion topics are the things that I want to focus on.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. And I think the one component of that I think is discussion is going to be potentially around some prioritization of perhaps this bond premium and some other things that are in that mix and the MSD. I think that is a discussion, but your point's well taken. The other thing I think that we saw last year is that the time we did spend around budget priorities was really, really helpful to kickstart that. So not specifically listed here, but some amount of time talking about that. And again, I don't think that's as long a session as last year because I think a lot of the work you did still applies, and we've certainly not solved all of what was discussed. So I think we can bring that back again. I know that Jeannie still has all that, so we can use that as a basis, just as there's something missing, something that needs to change before we start suggesting to you, here's where we need to focus, what new revenue or available revenue we might have. But I say all that to say, excellent point. Thank you.
Anything up there that says report, I think should be just reevaluated.
Got it. Councilman Rob.
The only other topic that I would like to add, but the list is getting so long, I would like us to have a discussion about, and I'm saying this because I want it to be a successful initiative. I'm not trying to point the finger at anyone, but the Veterans Memorial. That's another one that I would like to see what is going. I mean, whether we bring in some of the members of the committee, maybe we don't do it at the retreat, but I think this is an important topic. I have some ideas about things that we can do, but I think it's, and the one was great. But I think we really haven't made the progress. And I feel uncomfortable saying this in a public meeting because I don't want the chair, Bob Butler, or any of the committee members to feel that we're not appreciating their efforts. What I'm saying is that what can we do as a town to help them to accelerate these efforts, because it's just taken so long and we're not any further along with getting this done. And I don't know whether it's a subcommittee or I don't know whether it's bringing it back. I don't know. I don't know. And I feel really uncomfortable saying this because I feel like I'm going to potentially upset someone, but I'm trying to be constructive because I want this thing to succeed. I mean, you and I have worked on this, right? So I don't know whether a work session with them would be good, because a retreat topic won't allow them to sit at the table with us like we do with our committees, right?
So,
Does that make sense?
No, go ahead. No, but go ahead, Brandon.
so I think it's important to recall that the last conversation with council was that council at that point had felt they had done what was appropriate at the time, and that this was a Morrisville Veterans Memorial Foundation project that the town had lent support to. We had given them some funding up front to get to a design that was intended to support them, then going out to find the right supporters, to find donors, and to do some of that work to gather we'll round it nicely and call it $1 million to do that project. So I think if you are asking the town to get more directly involved, I think that's your first conversation with your peers is there support to have a different conversation other than we've supported them, we've given them a very nice design that can be used for fundraising. That I think is that is your first conversation. And then if there's consensus among the councils, I'm sorry to keep my back to you, if there's consensus amongst the council to do something differently, then we could certainly work from there.
Points might be like, we have an economic development director now. Is there a way to connect? I think one thing they need help with is just a way to accelerate introductions to companies that would be interested in funding this, so that we could get X amount of companies that we work with. That's just an idea. I'm comfortable with us investing some money to help them, but I don't know whether that's really what I'm asking. I'm just trying to say, what can we all as colleagues think that we can do to help? There has been success with the significant contributions to it. I just want to see it move forward, getting the money that we need to fund the design, getting a memorial built. I was in Nightdale, beautiful. I'm very curious of what that memorial cost in the town of Nightdale. I just, that's all I'm saying. I mean, and maybe we table it for now and we come back to it. But I just, when we had joint meetings with committees, I get a lot out of it because we hear from the committees of what could be helpful and what are the challenges.
Councilmember Johnson.
So don't forget, this is not a committee. They're a 501c3 nonprofit, so this is not a committee of the town. They have their own board. They work on their own. So I would tell you, if you want to help them right now, they need all the help they can get to fundraise, and they've come to the realization that while walk is really good for awareness, that's not going to help them get to the fundraising goals they need. So so you're right, they need help and with grant writing and looking for grants, and they are working on that. There are some new members of the board that are focusing on that. So I would tell you, if anybody knows anything where they can apply, that's the help they need. I would tell you that would be more helpful to them right now. They're the ones that can accept donations towards the construction of a memorial better than the town can, quite frankly. So, and they're also looking at doing a golf outing in May. So they're looking at doing 2 fundraisers a year now. And so I would tell you, help them get the participation they need in May for their golf outing as well. So I would tell you all to focus on that right now. The other thing is they now, and I don't know this for a fact because they have not had a meeting yet, and I have not asked this question, but I think they got a great deal of sponsorship for the walk this past Saturday or on November 9th. And so they probably have enough now. They were trying to get to the next level where they could actually do some construction drawings and to go to the next, because right now we just have a design concept. So I think they have made that threshold, but I don't know that for a fact. That's something at their next meeting that'll, I'm sure, be discussed. So anyhow, that's just my kind of 2 cents on that.
There.
Something really quick to add, is the town able to use our grant abilities and assets to help them find grants? Is that something that the town has already been doing, or are we not in a position to do that? Because I know that we have some assets with Central Pines and things like that that maybe could help them.
So we have not done that to date. I think we could probably at best point them
Right.
towards a grant application.
Right.
But we're doing the same thing. I mean, we're hunting grants constantly, and in all candor, not on the grant side of it, because there's going to be grants that might well be unique to that project.
Right.
But in terms of, and I also hate to say this, but we're also seeking sponsorships for some pretty significant projects. And do not get me wrong, I think that a Veterans Memorial is an amazing project, and I think the design they've got is beautiful, and I think it would be an amazing asset. But we've also got assets that we're trying to develop, so I wouldn't say we're in direct competition. But again, I think we have to fairly keep in mind of what our priorities are, and again, that's a 501c3 that is doing their work, and that we are doing our work. I think there is an opportunity, of course, with council, support, that should they reach that point of construction, again, it's going to be on our property, so there's going to be a logical partnership there. But I think we potentially could have some opportunity to be involved on that aspect of it. But from the fundraising aspect, I think that primarily is their responsibility right now.
I feel like we're rat holing a little bit on the Veterans Memorial.
I'm sorry,
I feel like we're rat holing a little bit on the Veterans Memorial. Either we can add it as a retreat topic or not, but I mean, could we make the call and move on?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilmember Body, do you have something different? Okay, thank you. All right, if there are no other additions, thank you. This is very helpful. Let me take this back, talk with the team, and we will try to frame this into how much time do we think we need. We'll weed out some of the things that have been suggested, and then we will share this with you to get perhaps some additional feedback. This won't come back as an action item per se. This is really more just a discussion, make sure we're on the same page. But I will bring the calendar back so we can get that out through the website and through calendars that we're going to print, things like that. If not, I'm good. Thank y'all.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Our next item is 2C, and that is Town Council and Roundtable. Giselle Rodriguez, our Deputy Town Manager, will facilitate this discussion.
Well, good evening. We do have 5 new roundtables listed for tonight. However, Councilmember Fender is not here, so we will not cover her items tonight. We will just push them until the next roundtable. So the first ones that we have on the list are from Councilmember Abadi. If you would like to introduce your items.
Okay. My first item is an idea for a social media internship program for more small businesses that would use, that would match up high school students that are good at and love social media and are considering careers in that field with small businesses that often don't understand how to use social media and are, could significantly improve their businesses if they did so. What I'm picturing is something like there's a group of 10 high school students, there's a group of 10 businesses. And I don't want it to be a big lift for staff, but what I was thinking was like they get together with Roz on Monday morning and map out a plan for the week, like a 1-hour meeting, then everybody goes and executes that plan for their small business, and they work primarily with the small business to to take videos and to post on different platforms and to get engagement. So that's my item. I just thought I think that'd be cool and could be something we could offer both youth that lives here and also would be a good thing for our small businesses too.
Question. Would this be like a 3-month, kind of a 12-week program? That way you can have different students move through this program, or it's like offered once a year? I know that's a detail, but I think it's an important detail so that staff can plan impact to their schedules. So I love the idea of helping businesses because they don't have a staff that's a social media person. They don't have, they are the advertising department and they are the finance department. They're everything department. But to have maybe something where you have 3 months, where they're going to have intense help. That's enough time for them to develop campaign and a presence. And it's also enough time for a high school student to get enough experience to use that for the next opportunity.
Yeah, I guess I was basically picturing it as kind of a summer internship situation, where I don't think it has to be a huge, they could pilot it with 2 or 3 businesses for that matter, and just see how it goes. But, but I was picturing it as a summer internship long enough for the companies themselves to gain some social media expertise and see what's possible, the kids to have a really good grounding in what this type of career actually looks like day to day, and to tap into something that might be a marketable skill and a good-looking internship on some resumes.
So, I know the chamber already does some internships for themselves. So I wonder if there's a good connection there with them, since they have a really good connection with the small business community in Morrisville.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Are you clicked on?
Thank you. No, I'm not clicked
Okay.
on. So I wonder, the chamber already does internship program internally for themselves. So I wonder if this could be a tie-in some way there, because they have good small business membership. And so I'm more than us, I'm wondering if this fits better working with them. That's a question. I don't know the answer.
So that's a good point, Liz, and I did think of that, but the problem there is that not to put too fine a point on it, but the chamber has almost no social media presence, and frankly, I don't think any expertise in this area. So I mean, they could definitely recruit businesses for the program, but I'm trying to make this not a heavy lift for staff. I'm seriously saying, like, Roz has a meeting with them in the morning, shows them how to plan out a week, and then they go and do it. That's their internship. And, we could put some metrics around it, like how much have they driven up the engagement of the business, give a prize at the end of the summer, bing, bang, boom. But I mean, it would be great if the chamber had that expertise. I would be all over the chamber doing it. But if the chamber had that expertise, they'd be doing it already.
No, yeah. So to your point, yeah, you're right. If that's the focus, I was thinking more just of the internship in general, the general internships. But I would also question what this does for our staff as far as workload. I think that would be a really, and you said, I don't want to make this a big effort on staff, so that would be my question. I don't know anybody can answer that right now.
So I guess what I'm asking is, could we take it to the comms department? That's what I just am basically asking for permission for somebody to go ask the comms department if they would be interested in doing it. If they say no, no harm, no foul, we won't do it. It's dead. But they might say yes.
If it's doable, if it's how much time, the commitment, yeah.
Okay.
So I would just add, like, the purpose of this is to bring up points like that and suggestions and ask if we are willing as a group to ask staff to look into it and bring back a brief or something. So I am at this point. It sounds like it's a good thing that could be looked into. We also have a small business specialist coming on sometime after Tiffany gets her feet under her, and that's moving along. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just comms.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, we could wait for a small business specialist. It's an idea for a potential program.
So are you ready to go? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Okay, yeah, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Okay, so you have full unanimous support for that.
Thank
Thoughts
you.
from staff?
I would say for clarification for that, you brought up a very valid point, is we are in that process where Morrisville Means Business has been a small business program that we have been running, and we are nearing that phase where the Morrisville Means Business will be transitioning, and that transition will be to the Economic Development Department as we hire the social business manager. There is collaboration with the communications department as that position gets hired, and what the future looks like for that position is something that we are still trying to define, but we can certainly take this in consideration, evaluate it, and as we have done with all the other items, bring information back to you.
Okay, thank you. And the second item that I had was the potential to, just on election day, add the 4 voting locations as shuttle stops on the Morrisville Smart Shuttle. Because I just think that if people could get a ride to the polls and get a ride home, I just think it's good for governments to support voting in any way that they can. So I don't know what it would cost, and I don't know what the logistics are, but I think it's something that we could look into.
We have, yeah.
Not every polling location's in Morrisville. The one that Liz's district is in Cary, actually.
No, I voted Morrisville Elementary, but yes, we have the
Okay.
one over off
There
of
is one.
Cary Parkway,
Shelton, off of Cary Parkway. Yeah.
Darrington Drive, 0503.
Oh,
yeah.
that's right. It moved. That's right. Sorry. Yes. It's Chandelier. You're
So
right.
not overcomable, but just something to keep in mind. So I'd support
I'd
looking
support
into it.
looking into it as a possibility.
Well, we already got one. Morrisville Elementary already there's a stop across the street, so
Yeah.
that one's done.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's a quick
Just
yes,
next
have staff
Get
look
one at
into that.
Parkside, get one at the Hindu Temple, we're there.
Yeah.
All right.
Staff need anything else on that one?
The one thing I will interject here is, so there's a few of other roundtable items that we provided an update for that are related to Smart Shuttle Stop, adding shuttle stop locations, whether it is for seniors or some of the others. The recommendation from staff that is provided on the update is that we are in the process now of securing the consultant for the study. Forget the name of the study. It's a study to determine whether it is best to continue with an on-demand, a hybrid, or a circulator for the Smart Shuttle. That study will be starting more than likely in January. We're securing the consultant right now to get contract in place. The recommendation for staff for those other roundtables is let's consider all of these suggestions as part of the study so that it then takes that in consideration with the overall program. So as this one is submitted, more than likely the recommendation will be very similar, is to include it as part of the study so that it is considered with the overall input into that process. And the process will have that engagement process where it would allow you to add any more input for the Smart Shuttle. But this appears to me very similar to the others, that it could be valuable information for the study.
Can I ask a question? So I agree that would be fabulous. I think as a part of that study, I would ask maybe that we look at other one-offs like this too, that would be, that we may want to think about. And the first thing that comes to mind is like some of our events. Do we want to have shuttle stop at, Diwali next year, or, July 3rd, or whatever events? So I would look at it more as one-offs, not just this one election day, but what does it mean to add them during the year as opportunities arise? Yeah.
Those are great points. We had anticipated to have those conversations at the December 10 council meeting, but given where we are with bringing the consultant on board, it makes more sense to push that conversation until January, February, to allow the consultant to start a portion of the investigation so that then we can have a work session with you all to gather all of those interests so that it could be factored in the study. and I remember the name, is the Alternative Transit Study. But all of those can feed into that, and I think the good thing we have specifically in this item is I think we may have a little bit of time to be able to factor that into the study before it really needs to be implemented, ideally. Does that sound okay?
Fine. Okay. Thank you very much. Those two are nice and quick. Temporary disc golf course now exists at Dragonfly. We all got data that I think it's being pretty well used. When the town center groundbreaking occurs, that would be tough to have that happening and doing work there and keeping the course. So we'll have these 9 baskets, we'll have the pads. So I was wondering if council would be interested in asking staff to look into repurposing them so that they get used instead of just sitting in a closet somewhere. And not the solution, but we have a couple of pieces of land that might be appropriate for it, one of which is up at Wake Tech, that land in the airport overlay, which we don't really have plans for designs until I think 2028. So until then, it's sitting fallow until we do something there. So there is a cost associated with doing something like this. It takes a little bit to install and to clear some of the fairways. That got to get rid of some of the trees, not all of them, because you want it to stay challenging. Another thing is the possibility of the southern lot, where we're thinking about expanding some of those amenities. That's a topographically challenging area, so we're looking into using it for something else, but in the temporary, we could maybe put baskets there. So my ask is just simply asking staff if they have any ideas of what we can use those baskets for when they're no longer at Dragonfly, whether or not it's worth looking into those sites or any other sites that they might recommend.
A disc golf course is literally the only usage where topographically challenging is a plus. You know?
Fair enough. Anyone else have any other thoughts?
They can look into it, put it out before doing it in the park.
Do we know that they're not already looking into it? So
That's not the process. The process is to talk and then throw it over and then ask them.
Are you looking into it, Brenda?
I thought they were, quite frankly.
So, I mean, we have considered the fact that we realize that Dragonfly is going to close because of town center construction, and it has been used. I just shared with you all some statistics. It is certainly being used. I think one of the challenges that we haven't done anything is that at Church Street we have a study going on now as to what the cricket expansion impact might be. So I think that would be very challenging to consider trying to put something into that space while we're studying that space for what might be changed. And then for Wake Tech, I think we just need to circle back with planning and verify, that we have access to it and that our agreement would allow for it there. And then we'd have to do some study to look at what would have to be done out there, make sure we have, a parking lot accessible and that we have that now and those sort of things. So I think there is an action we can take based on the request. But I would suggest it's at Wake Tech.
Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of that's the point, is the request, right, is to have them look into, is to have them look into it. I mean, you have almost 150 people a day running the course. It's pretty well used.
I thought it was more like 30 or 40 a day.
Yeah, we probably average 30 a day, which is fine. It's still pretty good use. So yes, I think we could look at something. Again, I've described Dragonfly as rudimentary. Just it's very basic, and it would be the same thing if it could happen at Wake Tech, because there's master planning to be done there. We don't know what that park or that ground is going to be when the time comes to master plan it and to commit some funds to that. We do not currently have anything underway for that, but we can take a look at whether a temporary golf course is even practical there.
Okay, and I'm asking now because it's January or February, so we got time to look into it and maybe take a look. So up or down?
That's fine.
Okay. That's really quick roundtable. Thank you all very much. That's the intent.
I do have a quick question on one item that it's on the updates. So, updates have been provided on a lot of items as well. Last meeting, we discussed about the years of service event is December the 13th, and combining that, just having council join the event with the staff, and then it gives you all the opportunity to share a few words with the staff, just spend some time with them as well. But I was going to ask you if you'll be up to a task. So we have decided we wanted to do, so it's going to be a catered event, but there will be desserts that people will bring in. But we are going to make the dessert potluck. Instead of a potluck, it will be a dessert bake-off. And then it'll be a competition between staff. And then my question is, we would like to have council be judges for the dessert bake-off.
Oh, I thought you were going to ask us to bake something.
Well, you certainly can if you would like to. So the only thing will be I'll communicate a little more with you now that I hear that there's some in favor, and we can probably, if you could just come in a little earlier to do the judging before the staff gets there, it'll be better. And then we will have a deadline for signing up for the event, so we will know how many desserts we will have for judging, and then they will bring the desserts early in the morning, and then we'll coordinate a time that works best for you all. If coming in an hour earlier, it's better. And then you guys will go through that. Then we can certainly do that. But we'll, if possible, we would like for you all to be the judges. We can probably make something happen.
Okay, this goes back to our days, Vicky, chili. Yes, we were
Chili
the
dessert.
judges for chili. It's very stressful, by the way, when you're judging.
Yeah.
Just remind me, I have it on my calendar, Giselle, but what time are we talking?
We set it up, I think, 11 to 1:30.
11:30 at 1.
Yeah. December the 13th is a Friday.
So I think you have support for judging.
Sounds like we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything? All done? Anything for the good of the order, sir?
No, sir. Wrap it up.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion to wrap it up.
Oh, never mind.
Oh, actually, one more thing.
No, I was
Stay.
I just wanted to circle back to the revenues and just to confirm what I said. It is a timing issue with that particular fee source for permits and fees. So you should see the revenue actually hit in this fiscal year. Just wanted to confirm that so he doesn't have to have a follow-up. Okay? Okay, thank you.
Or wrap it up. Okay. Councilmember Rabati with the motion. Councilmember Johnson with a second. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that carries unanimously. 5-0. Thank you all very much.